Hello, I'm Andrew Irwin, counsel in OSER's Emerging High Growth Companies Practice Group. Today I'm pleased to welcome Benjamin Allary, co-founder and CEO of BlueJay, building the AI-powered operating layer for global tax cognition. He is also the Osler Chair in Business Law at the University of Toronto and co-author of The Legal Singularity and the recently released Super Justice. All right, so Ben, BlueJay recently announced a significant $122 million US Series D financing round with participation from both new and returning investors. What do you believe this level of investment signals about the market's confidence in AI-driven solutions for the accounting and tax sector, and how do you plan to deploy this capital to further BlueJay's mission?
Great question, Andrew. I think it's all about recognizing that tax and accounting is a huge and I think underserved category within AI so far. The fact is that the global professional services market for tax specifically is in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's an area where there's been underinvestment, I would argue, for the past number of decades. We have really clear proof of product market fit. So, for example, our net revenue retention was over 200% last year. Our gross revenue retention is over 95%. Our net promoter score is in the low 80s on our platform. And so when you combine a large addressable market with really significant customer love, investors pay attention. As for what we're going to do with the capital, I mean, we've been busy in three areas. One is scaling up product and engineering. So we've basically doubled the team since we closed the round to accelerate the platform capabilities of BlueJay around international tax and accounting standards. On the go-to-market front, we've built out sales, customer success, and just last week we launched a product-led growth motion that lets tax people try BlueJay before their firm commits more broadly, which is really exciting, and I'm super excited to see how this plays out. And then we've also really invested a ton of energy and resources into content partnerships where we're licensing authoritative content from the leading nonprofit publishers globally, including Tax Notes, IBFD, and others across jurisdictions. And so we've been really disciplined about our use of proceeds. We're near break even and we have really strong cash reserves. So we're building for durability and speed at the same time. And the market uptake has been amazing. The press release when we announced the Series D referenced that we doubled in the first half of 2025. We doubled again in the second half of 2025. And already as we move into 2026, we're running significantly ahead of plan this year. So I'm really excited.
That's great, and you've been working hard, obviously. What factors do you attribute to the acceleration of the business, and what are you hearing from tax and accounting professionals about why they're adopting generative AI tools now rather than taking a wait and see approach?
I think, ChatGPT launched at the end of November in 2022. It's now been more than 3 years. We're coming up on 3.5 years of having ChatGPT and really credible large language models available for widespread, use in the market. I think we've moved from the time when folks were trying these kinds of tools out to now we're seeing folks really relying on tools like BlueJay to power their tax practices. It's remarkable the exponential curve that we've been following with usage on our platform. I think March 2026 is going to be our first million answer month at BlueJay. We recently crossed the 6 million tax research questions asked on the platform. We'll add a 7 millionth tax research answer this month in March. And basically year over year, usage is growing, between 4x and 5x month over month. And so this kind of exponential really does show people are moving from trying to relying on the technology. And I think the underlying reason is it's just really, really good. So it's really good at delivering accurate tax answers. It's not perfect yet, but we are working on improving it every day. And there are a few different ingredients going into it. Of course, the frontier, the foundational models continue to improve. And so we've got, OpenAI working away. We've got Anthropic working away on Claude. We've got Google working away on Gemini, and we are constantly testing all the different frontier models, and using them for different parts of BlueJay's capabilities. So we're getting a natural boost from the improvement in the models generally. But then we're also improving the content that is driving the system to even better, more authoritative answers and analyses to base the answers on. And then finally, we're learning from all of this use that we're seeing in the platform. So when people give feedback in BlueJay, and about 0.1% of the answers that BlueJay is delivering is leading to folks suggesting that the answer is not correct. They disagree with the answer for some reason. So 99.9% of the time, people are not disagreeing with BlueJay's answers. 0.1% of the time they are. And we're mining that feedback to improve the product even further. And so we're on this really exciting product improvement flywheel, and we're starting to move into the significant meat of the market where really big enterprise players are coming in. We now serve 3 of the big 4 accounting firms globally, which is really exciting. We've seen government adoption of BlueJay at this point, and so it's becoming really credible. We're getting into the point where these tools are so good and so effective that nobody can afford to ignore them anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time in the industry and kind of the world generally, how AI is really taking over. Pivoting
Absolutely.
back to the financing transaction. So the round was co-led by 2 growth equity firms who both made significant investments. Introducing new investors can significantly change the governance dynamics of a company. Can you share how you selected those 2 lead investors and your experience working with them since closing?
Sure. Heading into the round, it was my intention to really find those firms that understood BlueJay's business and could be really supportive for us as we scaled up the business as much as we possibly could, rely on them. And so, and this is something that we did in consultation with counsel at Osler. So thank you, Andrew, and thanks to your colleagues for helping me sharpen my thinking about how to approach this. But basically, we had a sense of what a defensible market value would be for BlueJay at the time, given how the business was progressing and our strengths and what we foresaw in the immediate term. We kind of set quite reasonable expectations about what the deal terms should be. And then I had a number of conversations with firms, and I went shopping for the firms that would be, the best fit for BlueJay, and had the most understanding of our business. And we settled on Sapphire, who are, of course, one of the top growth equity investors, where their critical mass is in California and in Austin, Texas. And then also Oak HCFT, their critical mass is in Connecticut and New York. So kind of an East Coast and a West Coast investor. And what drew me to those firms in particular were the individual partners who'd be joining the BlueJay board. So Kathy Gao at Sapphire and Alan Miller at Oak HCFT, both fantastic people, different strengths for each of them. And each of their firms bring a supportive bench of functional support that can help BlueJay. And what I really liked about the idea of bringing on co-leads for the round is the 2 firms have different uncorrelated strengths. So East Coast, West Coast, maybe, this is a stereotype, but the East Coast are going to be more like fintech and more conservative by nature, given the New York milieu. And then a West Coast investor is going to be a little bit more aggressive, bring some more of that Bay Area energy to helping out BlueJay. And it's been so fantastic. They've more than delivered on what I expected them to be able to help us with. And they both have fantastic teams. We've been adding a lot of talent to the team. So we recruited a president for the go-to-market. That's Tina Goldburn. She joined us in September. and she's been fantastic. And we just hired a new CFO, Grant Hughes, who just joined us this past week, actually. And in both of those searches, the talent teams from both Sapphire and Oak have been quite helpful in helping us find the candidates for our shortlist and doing a final vetting of the candidates. So on the talent side, it's been fantastic. On the product side, it's also been very helpful to get their feedback and to talk through the longer term way in which we're making BlueJay into an essential platform for tax professionals. So I couldn't be happier with how things have gone, and a lot of it was approaching it with the right mindset and understanding the market, and that's where Osler has been super helpful to me personally and to BlueJay in getting that right.
That's great. It's such a partnership when you take on new lead investors, and really glad to hear that you're having such a great experience. It's so much beyond just the financial investment that these investors offer. It's also, as kind of a side point, a great example of US investors finding good, high quality Canadian companies to invest in. There's been a lot of, discussion over the last few months about, whether US investors are willing to invest in Canadian companies. And so this is a great example of, what we see in the market that, there really is not a material barrier to taking on US investment. Pivoting back to kind of the general market and AI. So as a pioneer in applying generative AI to tax research and analysis, you have a unique vantage point on how this technology is reshaping professional services. Looking ahead, how do you see the relationship between AI tools like BlueJay and tax professionals evolving? And what new capabilities or applications are you most excited about bringing to market?
Well, let's start with how laborious and painful tax research is just generally, Andrew. So everybody, all kinds of tax professionals, whether you're talking about accountants or you're talking about tax lawyers, if you're talking about, folks in government, so tax auditors, others working for the Canada Revenue Agency or the IRS or in the UK, HMRC, everybody struggles with just how complex and deep tax law is. And it's extremely difficult to get to a confident answer in a lot of areas of tax. And so um, it's just, it's super painful. And I say this as somebody who has been a tax law professor for the last 20 plus years at the University of Toronto. I've literally spent thousands of hours of my own life doing tax research. So I'm really familiar with that pain. What's amazing is you can now leverage BlueJay. You can ask essentially any tax research question in a direct kind of human, plain language sort of way of BlueJay. And BlueJay is going to give an extremely good answer by very, very quickly working through millions of pages of tax law. And so it includes like the statute, it includes regulations, it includes administrative rulings, it includes all the case law, a lot of professional news and commentary. And we've licensed, and BlueJay will scan all of those materials, find the most germane materials, synthesize all of it, and produce a very direct, plain language, often extremely well reasoned answer to your tax research question. And it flips the entire tax research exercise on its head. In the past, you might have done a Google search or even like a Boolean search within one of the traditional tax research platforms. And you'd get a list of, really authoritative documents to sift through and lots of links to click on and then materials to read. And you yourself would be doing the work that BlueJay now does in essentially reading and understand at a conceptual level all of those materials and then generating a response. So I think ultimately this isn't going to be something that is a problem for tax professionals. I think the effect is going to be very similar to what we saw with spreadsheets in accounting. Andrew, you're too young to remember these days, and to some extent I am too. So this is based on hearsay, but I seem to recall people older than us talking about it like in the late 70s, early 80s when VisiCalc and Lotus 123 and spreadsheets first came out. Oh, now this will be the end of accounting because everybody will be able to to very quickly do all of the work that bookkeepers and accountants have been doing with respect to numbers. But that's not at all how the world has played out, as you know. We now have more accountants than we've ever had. Spreadsheets saved a lot of the really tedious work uh, from taking up accountants' time and bookkeepers' time. But we now have more of each, and we leave the professionals to exercise their judgment, and they can move much more quickly over all of the tax law materials, and end up producing the strategic advice to service their clients and actually ultimately unlock more value for their clients. And so my prediction is within the next few years, it will become, I would say, unthinkable to practice tax without an AI research layer informing the analysis. It'd be like trying to do accounting without a spreadsheet. It'd be like you could still do it, but nobody would choose to do it. It just wouldn't make any sense.
Absolutely. I think that'll be true across many different verticals of professional services as well. So it'll be interesting to see how, AI continues to proliferate through those industries. Thank you very much, Ben. This was really insightful. I think it's going to be really interesting. You have a great perspective over what it's like to do a material financing transaction like this, to build a successful business, and really appreciate your time and feedback here.
Thanks, Andrew. I'd be remiss not to close with, some more words of praise about Osler's role in Blue Jay's journey. Um, Back in 2015, Jeff Tabor actually worked with me to initially incorporate Blue Jay, effective April 21st, 2015. I can't forget that day. It's on the original incorporation documents. And so from that time, of course, Jeff passed away, unfortunately. But then we landed on the desk of Chad Bain, and Chad's been an incredible resource for Blue Jay after Jeff essentially handed the baton to Chad, and now Chad, of course, has introduced us to you, and you've been a phenomenal resource for Blue Jay as we've been navigating the last few years through our Series C financing, our Series D financing, some strategic divestitures. All these complex commercial things that we've been doing have been done hand in glove with the Osler team. So it's been really fantastic. And I love the fact that I also hold the Osler chair in business law at the University of Toronto. It just kind of feels like this is a match made in heaven here. So thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for this conversation and a chance to talk a little bit about what Osler has meant to Blue Jay. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the nice words and really enjoy working with you.